how emotional intelligence is going to assist you. We have Francis is saying things from Karatina. We have Juliet Peter is saying is in the. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Richard J. Magoma. I'm going to be your host tonight. This is not in a position to be around, but she's watching from somewhere. She's in Mombasa. And I have my co-host who is doing sign language. That is Catherine Sidandi. And that is how we do things, getting it right. Tonight, we are going to see how emotional intelligence is important for leadership. Before we jump into the conversation, I am going to read the names of sponsors, the organizations, and people who have made this particular conversation to be on air. We have to appreciate them, kindly appreciate them once I am done reading. We have Nile Front Cottages. Nile Front Cottages is in Jinja. It is a very beautiful place to go and rest once you've made a lot of money. Money is meant to be used, and you use it in better places. And what a better place to be other than the Nile Front Cottages. The accommodation is good, the food is good, the customer experience is good. Please, if you are from around, that is Kenya, TZ, Uganda as well, Nile Front Cottages is the place. Then the people who do psychometric tests, the people who train us about emotional intelligence, the people who certify, GNUC certification, Profiles International, East Africa. Please, those are the people you need to talk to if you want emotional intelligence certification, doing psychometric tests. Then we move to Rwanda, where we have K2 HR services. If you're in Rwanda, K2 HR services are the people to talk to. It doesn't matter where you are in East Africa. K2, they're in Rwanda, but they do their work around East Africa. Then we have Steadfast Quality Solutions, where we have our friend Herbert Zake from Uganda. He does a lot of training and he does a lot of checking the strengths that professionals have. He has done a lot of mining, if I should use that word, checking or assessing what kind of strengths you have to over 500 people, and he continues doing it under Steadfast Quality Solutions Limited. And when we're talking about insurance issues, we are talking about AAR, and they say you are in control. That is when you take the insurance. If you are interested with medical insurances and other types of insurance, that is the place to be, AAR Insurance. Then in Mombasa, where we are going to have our tea on the 26th from 5 onwards, Hotel Sapphire is the place to be. They have got amazing ambience. The place is absolutely welcoming if you want to enjoy live in Mombasa. Hotel Sapphire is where to be. Then when you are in Nyanyuki, Tufa Resort, not necessarily being in Nyanyuki, if you want to rest, if you want to enjoy very scenic ambience, Tufa Resort are your people. Then if you are interested with the things to do with good work, those beautiful chairs and learning, all that pertains to that, Panessa Training Institute are your people. Panessa Training Institute are your people. Then for those people who love saving, those people who love investing, Ports Sacco, Uplifting Life, that is where to be. That is where to save your money. That is where to put your money so that it can grow, so that it can give you premiums. And for those people who are foodies, those people who love food, and I know so many of them are on this call, you love good food. So Ted Kinyumbani are your people. And they are in Nyanyuki. They have eaten severally there. The food is absolutely good. Is the place to be. Then, of course, behind the sick notes, that is the next webinar that is going to be on the 18th of September 2025 from 2 p.m. to 5 p.m. And it will cost you 2,800, where we will have Dr. Melanie Murgol and your moderator of choice, Grace, and of course, Catherine Sidandi. Please make that date. The date is the 18th of September. What HR needs to know about work injury compensation. Please mark that date, the 18th from 2 to 5 p.m. 2,800. Okay. Then we have Africa Transformation Leadership Conference from 1st to 3rd of October. It will be in Nairobi at Sarova Pan-Afric. It will cost you 50,000 shillings. It will give you 6 CBD points. It is being led by K2 Career Center and the Institute of Human Resource. Ladies and gentlemen, here is the T Pwani edition. It will be on the 26th of September from 5 onwards, and it will only cost you 2,000 shillings. It will be at the hotel that I've just mentioned, Hotel Sapphire. Make a point, make this date, diarize that we have the Pwani edition T on the 26th. But tonight, we have an amazing speaker. He has been here before and does an amazing job. He's a CEO, he's a certified coach. He's going to tell us more. Ladies and gentlemen, put your emojis and stickers together for Newton Siele. Newton, you're welcome on board. Tell us how we should use emotional intelligence to become better leaders. As you've been told, I think there's a lady who said that she was tried. How do you control yourself so that you do not say things that you're going to regret? Over to you, Newton. Tell us how we should use EQ to become people of better influence.
Thank you so much, Richard. It's always a pleasure to be back here at Tara and Get It Right. Thank you so much, Grace. And I hope that we're going to be having a very interesting conversation about emotional intelligence. We are biased on leadership today, but remember, you really have to start somewhere. So even whether or not you are a leader, you have to look at it in the context of emotional intelligence. And I hope by the end, Richard, what I'm hoping to be able to convince everybody here is that there's a very steep price to pay when you don't have an emotionally intelligent leader. And from where I stand, it also means that your own self as a leader. So let me share my screen and then do let me know once you can be able to see it.
We have it. We have it.
Great. Yeah. So so my name is Newton. It's a pleasure to be here. I think this is my third time. I believe so. On my day job, I work as a CEO at Philips Therapeutics, position I've been for the last good 10th year today. But I'm also a certified practitioner in emotional intelligence with Genos, and really just passionate about leadership. And that's what I want to talk about today, especially emotional intelligence and intentional leadership. And I think sort of to put it into perspective, I'd like to start by just reminding us about the basics, and I hope that you can be able to see from your screen. So let's start with the brain, because I think if we're talking about emotional intelligence, it makes sense to start with the brain. The three most important things for me that I want you to remember, number one, is this part called the amygdala, quite a mouthful. The amygdala, as you can see, is like a small thing on your on your brain. I'm just using my cursor to show. that gets direct sensory information, which it then learns, stores, and then it uses it to control emotional responses. So I hope that we'll remember that word today. And it also includes enabling your body to react quickly to the sight or sound of a threat. So that's how important amygdala for us is. It's almost like that folder within your part of the brain that really stores how you will react depending on whether you perceive something to be a threat or not. That's important. Now, the second thing I want to say is that there's this part of the brain called the hypothalamus, which produces very essential hormones. These chemical substances help us to control temperature, thirst, hunger, sleep, mood, sex drive, and the release of other hormones within the body. Why do I say that is important? Because there are certain chemicals that communicate information throughout our brain and body. Of the ones that we'll probably just need to remember are three. One is dopamine, because this is related to the experiences of pleasure and the reward learning process. So it's a good vibe if you want to remember it that way. And then we have serotonin, which is associated with the memory and learning. And by the way, you will find that this has been shown to actually play a critical part in the regeneration of the brain cells, which is linked to easing depression. So obviously, if you want to have a balanced life, you want to have more serotonin. And lastly is norepinephrine, and this one is very important because it comes when we are stressed, and we know it as a fight or flight. If you remember that concept that we were taught in biology, it just helps your body manage stress and anxiety. Now, of course, if there's one thing that you want to have is a lot of dopamine and probably serotonin. Okay, the more you have adrenaline, the more stressed you are, and you are on the edge. The six basic emotions that I usually classified on this is fear, hunger, disgust, happiness, sadness, and surprise. And as we will see, you can't talk about the science of emotions without talking about the brain. And I think it makes sense for us to start from that perspective. And so neuroscience, as we know it, shows us that whenever an event occurs, even when somebody is talking to us, our brain from the amygdala just decides that this is either a friendly or this is a threat. And then your body reacts depending on what that classification has been. And so that emotional part of the brain makes a very quick and unconscious determination. And so it tags, communicates your brain, and your body reacts. And I think often when we tell people that, by the way, forget about what you're saying, the way your body language is says a lot about yourself. It is that part of the brain that helps us to really anticipate the behavior and determine the response that we will give. So, in a nutshell, emotional intelligence. But let me put it this way also. You can have either positive or negative emotions. And I think what I'm hoping I can convince you is that the last thing you want is negative emotions. But let's first talk about the positive emotions before we talk about the negative emotions. What we have seen, and in the context of leadership, whenever you have positive emotions, people tend to think more openly. They are creative. They are lateral. They tend to be open to new ideas. They tend to want to learn. They look at something from very different perspectives. It also, more importantly, increases the dopamine levels, which, as we said earlier, are very important for interest in things and learning. Now, if you think about the opposite, when there is negative emotions that is triggered, it also limits the functioning of our prefrontal cortex. And by the way, you don't even want to think. Most of us who've been angry at somebody, most of us who've been angry in a meeting, most of us who have entered into, you could even say, a relationship, it could be a job, it could be a career. The moment you have negative emotions, the last thing you want to do is to think. You're just on survival mode. And so it's not surprising that wherever we have negative emotions, it's also linked to diminishing our cognitive resources. So you hardly want to be able to grow. And I know we have a lot of HR experts here. And maybe when we are looking at the performance of teams and performance of individuals, one of the things that we often fail to recognize is what sort of emotions, by the way, do our leaders evoke in these teams? Are they positive? Are they negative? What are we seeing? And what you're seeing is more important than what people are saying. And I'm hoping I'll convince you why this is important for businesses. So if you contrast the two, the last thing you want is to have a team, or you want people that are narrow-minded. You don't want people that limit their interpretation of events. You don't want people that reduce linear conscious processing. So they don't even want to think. People that tend to focus on fight or flight, meaning they are always on the edge. People that shrink from opportunities. People that demonstrate disengagement behaviors. People that are easily triggered. If you have that, as I said, by the way, the chances are you really want to look what is it that is missing from an AI perspective from this leader. On the contrary, a success is really linked where you have people that have positive emotions. And as we have said, there's more rational, creative problem solving. They are more open to new ideas. They are more willing to try difficult things and develop new solutions. They cause engagement. They take more risks. They see more options. They even increase dopamine levels, which are important in interest and learning. And so they are willing to actually shape, adapt, and they are malleable depending on the environment. In fact, we usually say they are future proof in business. What I'm trying to say is that when it comes to emotionally intelligent leadership competencies, and if you want to call it intentional leadership with AI, what you certainly don't want, and I have sort of put it, and you can see I'll try and use my cursor here. Under this inner circle are the traits that we don't want to be. And I'll highlight them in a minute. Number one is that you don't want to be disconnected as a leader. You don't want to be insensitive as a leader or as an individual. You don't want to be untrustworthy as an individual. You don't want to be limited as an individual. You don't want to be temperamental. You don't want to be indifferent. Because the opposite of that is that instead of being disconnected, you should be self-aware, which means that you're present. Instead of being insensitive, you're aware of others, which means that you are empathetic. Instead of being untrustworthy, you are authentic and therefore perceived as being genuine. Instead of being limited, you actually apply emotional reasoning and therefore you're seen as expansive in the way you look at things. Instead of being temperamental, you practice self-management, which means that you're more resilient. And instead of being indifferent, you're inspiring as a leader, which also means that you're empowering. And so if you think about it, and I really want us to take this home, is that the last thing you want to be as a leader, the last thing you want to be as an individual is somebody who is perceived to be disconnected, insensitive, untrustworthy, limited, and temperamental and indifferent. And these are traits, I would say, that are the complete opposite of a leader with emotional intelligence. And hopefully we'll, as I said, relate this to what we do every single day. What do we mean when we say that you want to be the complete opposite? What do we mean when we say that you want to be an emotionally intelligent leader? You want to have a high level of self-awareness as a leader. And because self-awareness is about being aware about the behavior that you demonstrate, you know it. You know what your strengths are, you know what your limitations are, and you know what those strengths and limitations impact on other people. You know, obviously, the things that you need to be able to work on. But because you're conscious about them, you then practice them, which makes you an emotionally intelligent leader. The second thing is that you also then want to be aware of others, as a leader. And being aware of others is about noticing and acknowledging others. It's ensuring that they feel valued and adjusting your own style to best fit with them. So if you enter a room and you find that people look like they're sad, the first thing you want to ask is, everything okay, guys? What could be wrong? We don't have to start our meeting. We can take 5 minutes. If you notice somebody comes in to the room and you can see that probably they have been crying, you say, wait a minute, guys, can we pause? Maybe we need to just take a quick break and then we can be able to come back. So you can reach out and find out what could be wrong. Being aware of others as a leader is being an emotionally intelligent leader. The other thing is being authentic. And being authentic, I think it's self-explanatory, because authenticity is about being open. It's openly expressing yourself. It's honoring commitments. But more than just honoring commitments, you encourage that behavior in the people that you work with. And so when they see that you as a leader are also honoring the promises that you have made and that you're encouraging people to honor the commitments, when people promise to do something, that's what you focus. Because you do it, you also encourage the people that you work with to be able to do it. That's authenticity. That's emotionally intelligent leadership. And that's extremely important. The fourth thing is also, as we said, you don't want to be limited, is practicing emotional reasoning as a leader. And that means it's about using information and feelings first from yourself and then others and combining it with other facts and information when decision making. I remember somebody that I was discussing with and I was coaching and they asked me a very interesting question and they said that look, I as somebody comes to me and they want to pass an idea, but I don't feel like it's the right idea. So how do I tell them? And I said, the first thing as an emotionally intelligent leader is that first you have to be cognizant about the things that we have said, but you also need to look at it from not just your feeling, but for the feeling of the other person, and then look at the facts as they are and be able to give the information from a holistic perspective. That is emotional intelligence as a leader. Emotional reasoning is something you cannot do without. Which brings me to the fifth and very important competency, and this is self management as a leader. Obviously, we live in a times also today when you find that you have to struggle about your own moods and emotions. You have to struggle about trying to balance time, trying to balance your personal life plus your work life. You know, managing everything has become so difficult. And in all this, sometimes you really don't even get the time to be able to sharpen yourself, to just take that time to be able to re energize, rejuvenate. And I'm hoping that Grace will tell us about that and Mombasa. But as a leader, you cannot say that you're truly emotionally intelligent if you're not even able to manage your own time, if you're not able to manage your own behavior, and if you're not able to continuously improve on yourself. And so if you are to reflect and ask yourself, you'd be saying, when is the last time, by the way, that I sharpened? I mean, it's like you're a knife, right? When is the last time you could say that you actually sharpened yourself? And how sharp are you based on how frequently you're doing that? And I think because we're talking about leadership and inspiring performance, I cannot fail to mention about the last and most important competency here, which is inspiring performance as a leader. Because anybody that wants to have a team that succeeds should be able to facilitate high performance within the organization. And this is done through problem solving, through promoting, recognizing, and supporting others. You will note that it's very difficult for you to succeed just by applying only one aspect of the competencies. Somehow there's a direct correlation between each of these. But I'm sure, and maybe it's the same for you, Richard, you're asking Newton, but how bad can it get, really? I mean, we can't survive, right? Do we really have to practice emotional intelligence? I would say it depends on which perspective you sit. Some of you may be familiar with the study that was published in 2023 by Gallup. Again, I'm speaking to people in HR, so you'll be very familiar with this, which was looking at employee engagement. Richard, you probably remember this because I think it was the first time that buzzword of quiet quitting became the most trending topic. And what they found out was that 83% of Kenyan workers, 83%, only warm seats and watch the clock. I don't think that's a statistic that we really want to be known about, especially because we say that Kenyan are very hardworking people. But 83% is scary. It's scary if you're a HR person to imagine that only 17 out of 100 people that you have are probably actually putting in not just the time, but the work. But the rest are literally just waiting for the for the stipulated time as per the employee handbook to be able to clock out and wait for their paycheck at the end of the month. And sometimes we don't think about this from the perspective of an emotionally intelligent organization, if I may just say, not just leadership. But if you're looking at transformation, and I'm going to relate this to two stories very quickly. If you're looking at transformation, the first thing I want to say that maybe we need to also admit is outdated is this thing, but it's in your organization looking at and waiting and probably proposing that there should be an annual team building. You're not doing justice to your team. Number one, a team building that is done annually in itself, we should probably not call it team building. Maybe it's an activity or it's an event. Because real team building, and you want to try and change the organization, why wait until the end of the year to be able to do it? So an emotionally intelligent leader and organization is able to facilitate within the organization.
We have lost Newton. We will continue waiting for him, but I can see some questions are coming. Rispa, we can take our questions to the Q&A so that it doesn't get lost in the comments. Welcome back, Newton. Some technology is doing a big one on you. You're welcome. Welcome, Newton. You're on mute.
Sorry, I was also just trying to see if I can be able to switch. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Yes, we can.
Okay. Okay. As my son would say, technology. Technology. That's what they say, I think, on the memes. What I was trying to say before I dropped off is just trying to encourage my colleagues that please let's really look at team building, or at least use the right terminology so that you don't have to wait until the end of the year before you take your team to do that. And the best way to do it is use every opportunity during meetings, during sessions that you have, during ramble sessions or whatever you call it in your organization, to really break down and get to bond as often as possible. That is extremely important. And I'm sure maybe you might also be wondering, Richard, Newton, really, what is the worst case scenario if you're talking about these emotionally intelligent organizations or leadership? What is the worst case scenario? I have one more story that I want to talk about before we sort of come to a conclusion here. And this one is about the story of Uchumi. And for those of you who've probably heard me before, I think usually in most case studies we talk about Uchumi, we talk about Tuskys, we talk about Nakumatt. I was seeing today somebody posted, I think, on LinkedIn, where they had sort of having this nostalgia about somehow they've kept those paper bags from Tuskys, from Uchumi, from Nakumatt. I feel like it is really nostalgia. There was a lot of deep diving that was done to understand what could really have gone wrong with Uchumi. In fact, in the Senate, and for those of you that have probably time, there was a standing committee that was set up on trade, tourism, and industrialization that really were tasked. It was called the Report on the Inquiry into the fall of Nakumatt and Uchumi supermarkets in Kenya, and it was released by the Speaker in 2018, October in 2018, and so you can be able to get the full report. But it's interesting that, and I've just captured a statement here that says even bad leadership, gross mismanagement, in itself became a significant recipe for the failure. Now, for me, I extrapolate. Maybe I'm a little bit biased, but I see bad leadership as being the opposite of an emotionally intelligent leader. I see gross mismanagement being directly linked to a leader who is not authentic by themselves in nature. And when I went further, in fact, when you go actually a few years back, remember this was 2018 already. By that time, majority of Uchumi was already off the life machine. I went back to a study that was published in 2011 by Kariuki for his MBA, and there was a very interesting comment that he had put, in the summary. Despite Uchumi supermarket being for a long time a leading retail chain in Kenya, mismanagement of resources, and how to think of it in the context of an emotionally intelligent leader and organization that were meant to have been there, and low staff morale, we talked about it 3%, so it looks like we didn't just start yesterday, led to poor business performance. Because you said if 83%, Richard, are just quiet quitters, they're only waiting for the clock to be able to log off. It's not surprising that they therefore have a low level of commitment. And as a result, they don't have the self-sacrifice to drive the organization. And that also resulted, which was very interesting, in the least customer service that they could give. And so what more then do we need to hear in terms of the importance and probably the worst case scenario that can happen when you don't have an AI-led organization? I want to finish with this. How do you become an emotionally intelligent leader? And sort of it's just, sort of ringing again that bell about that core particular message. And we've talked about it. Number one, you have to be more self-aware. How do you become more self-aware? You need to seek feedback from others on your behavior and how you impact on them. You need to become more familiar with the way you tend to think, to feel, and act at work. You need to be more aware about your strengths and limitations. If the leaders knew at that particular time that, look, we're not so good in this, maybe we need to get help in this particular area, they could have saved these organizations that we're talking about. You need to behave in a way that is consistent with how you expect others to behave. If as a leader, you also want people to be prudent in the way they manage the resources, for example, would they have had these significant problems that they ran into if they were doing that? Number two, how then do you become more aware about others? Remember, the employees, when they were interviewed, said that they were not motivated at all. And when you don't make people feel appreciated by thanking them for their efforts, then you're doing the complete opposite of an emotionally intelligent leader. You're supposed to adjust your style so that it fits to others, not in a way that is negative, but knowing the strengths that they have. You pay more attention to their demeanor, their body language, their facial expressions, where they're coming from, how they are doing, how their families are doing. And why is it that organizations that succeed even globally do a lot more in terms of being aware about their employees? There's a direct correlation. And so you need to be able to balance achieving results with the other needs, explore how people feel about their work experience, considering the workload and the level of stress, and where high, explore ideas to address both in the short and long term. And we keep seeing that this is one of the things that could have been lacking. Of course, as I said, if you look at the Senate report on that standing committee, for sure, Mia would underline not just once, but 3 times about the need of becoming more authentic as a leader. Expressing your thoughts and feelings in a way that is sensitive to those of others, being open and honest about mistakes. Had these organizations admitted that, look, guys, we're not doing so well, we're not managing our resources, we're not creating more customers, we're not gaining more customers, we're looking market share. Had they kept their promises, had they been authentic in the way they work, would they have had the same challenges that they're feeling? And so a highly emotionally intelligent leader is able to respond effectively when challenged, and they don't just get defensive. Okay. Number 4, you need to practice more emotional reasoning. And how do you do this? You consider issues from multiple perspectives, consider different stakeholders impacted by the issue, consult others. It's interesting because when we look at and I was reading that article today about what is the difference between, these Uchumi, Tuskys, Nakumatt, and what we have today as what you see in Quickmart, in Naivas, in Carrefour. One of the things that they have done is that they're using data to adapt very quickly. They're trying to make sure that they are ahead of what the customer needs. They're going to places where they feel like there's a lot more opportunities. They're quickly diversifying what they are availing. They're trying to adapt so that even when they have stores that are in those areas that the customers maybe want to get certain particular items or food delis, they're using that. And so when you take the bigger picture into the account, in essence, when you practice more emotional reasoning, it actually adds an advantage to you and the organization. And the other thing that is important is that you need to practice more self-management. And as a leader, it also means that you manage your emotions in difficult situations. Strong emotions, by the way, narrow our thinking. So when you're frustrated or you're angry and you're fearful, you may not think clearly. And we have seen leaders that they rule with a lot of anger and bitterness. And it's not surprising that that's the same thing that their team expresses. You don't need a rocket scientist to see that. When you learn to balance, meaning that you eat well, you sleep well, you exercise, you engage in mind-body practice, somehow, even as a leader, you actually tend to be much, much more better. When you sleep less, when you don't eat properly, when you're struggling with many other things, somehow that imbalance that you have because of lack of self-management also translates to poor leadership. So keeping up to date with the trends within the industry, striving to improve your performance, adapting to new circumstances, all these things we are saying didn't seem to exist, and they do seem to have a significant impact on the organization. Last but not least, a leader has to inspire performance. And of course, there's no business that is ever set up that is not meant to thrive or survive. I don't think the founders of Uchumi, in this case, it was the government actually, or Nakumat, or even Tuskys, ever intended that they would be forgotten in the books of history. A leader that inspires performance provides support and guidance by asking the team, how can we do better? What do we need to do to be able to be the best in the industry? They pay attention to what the staff are doing well. They find more challenges at work, and they find great assistance around those challenges. They provide constructive feedback. You give feedback to the team on how they are doing. You highlight the areas that they are, blind. They're most likely blindsided. You focus on describing behavior that you have observed rather than judging individuals. And when we have leaders that are so much focused on judging people, then you miss out the opportunity because, by the way, no organization runs without people. And so you need to balance feedback as a leader to inspire performance. You help people understand their purpose and contribution. And so they don't just feel demotivated, demoralized, and they give the worst customer service. But more importantly, and I'm sure most of you will agree with me, you maintain a positive work environment, you role model effective emotions, you balance, one of discussing and meeting so that there's a focus on both challenges and things that are working. You resolve conflicts, you don't bury them under the carpet, but also recognize the hard work and the achievements that people have made. I want to finish in 1 minute by saying, what are some of the things that I want you to remember? Number one, leaders in business looking to improve their organization's performance do so by improving their emotional intelligence, right? There's a correlation between lack therein and their performance. And what do we mean? That particular link actually exists. And it's one of the most robust and consistent findings in research. In high-performing organizations, people feel significantly more engaged, cared for, valued, proud, and motivated. And unfortunately, in low performing organizations, people feel significantly fearful, stressed, disempowered, uncertain, and of course, unmotivated to do anything. And so I want to close with this, Richard, which will also be our key takeaway. And I'd request people that for those who have their screens, you can take a screenshot and have it as your WhatsApp status for the next 24 hours. Leadership is fundamentally about facilitating performance, and performance is people. And so it's not rocket science because I'm speaking here or I'm preaching to the choir. A leader's emotional intelligence is key to their capacity to facilitate emotions in others and drive high performance. It's as simple as that. And it's much more than just a moral compass. It's also the best recipe for success. I hope I have been able to put my case, Richard, and that you and the rest of our audience today are convinced about the impact of this.
Thank you. Can we appreciate Newton? We will say that you have done a commendable job by starting to say that your slides are absolutely clean. That is a good start. There are several comments. Cynthia Award has said very insightful and informative. Now there's a question by Kenyanjui Ndongoni. Can staff who are struggling with underlying psychosocial issues really connect at the emotional level? Can staff who are struggling with underlying psychosocial issues really connect at the emotional level?
That's a good question, Richard. But I think the first step is, I would say it's positive that there's somebody who has recognized those underlying issues, which I think it's an important barrier that you need to be able to overcome. But obviously, it's more than it's not just enough to be emotionally aware, and that's why we have said if you look at the other competencies that we have talked about, you have to be able to apply them so that people can be able to understand when they go into meetings. They should not be afraid. They should not feel shy to be vulnerable. They should not feel shy to address things that they are ashamed about. We all go through this. The problem we have seen is where people want to pretend that they don't go through it. When you do that, I think, as we have seen obviously from that, it may be a little bit biased from just one study of Uchumi. It can have very bad consequences because those people will not deliver. But please feel free, Richard, to also put in your thoughts on the same.
I'll come there. Now that you have mentioned the concept of vulnerability, we live in a very masculine culture whereby men, especially, are told not to show their vulnerable part. What can you tell them? Nobody, probably men are told not, you should not confess your mistakes, you should not show weakness, you should not show your emotions. What can you advise men leaders, especially those who have been made to internalize that don't
Hey,
Mm.
yeah, I would say, Richard, please don't suffer in silence. Don't carry shackles, because you, as a friend of mine was telling me, you will get into depression, and it's a very deep dark hole that you might not get out of. And unfortunately, once you're in that deep dark hole and you can't get out of it, it's your life that's gone. So you'd rather break those barriers. You may appear as going against the grain. There's a topic I think we've had before, Richard. I can't remember whether we've spoken with Grace, but for men, when we talk about health specifically, we can almost correlate the struggles that they have with some of this underlying, as I said, cultural barriers that they have, especially on mental health and wellness. So, I mean, it's not worth your life. I think it's important to understand that you need to be able to reach out and get help. You won't just be saving yourself, but usually as a man, you also have a family you're providing for, you're taking care of. So in the end, you're actually protecting your family by taking that bold step.
Thank you very much. Rispa Karaoke. Hello, is guilt tripping considered a component of emotional intelligence, and how can HR practitioners effectively recognize and address it in the workplace?
That's an interesting question, because I would consider guilt tripping, especially with people that are notorious for gaslighting, as hiding behind something. And I think for the people that we are talking about here, it's really also, it goes to the second competency about just your awareness about others and just being able to adapt. Most people that do that, either guilt trip or gaslight, are usually hiding behind something by deflecting it. And so you have to be very, for lack of a better word, you have to be very sensitive to be able to pick this out. And usually you can do that when you try and unpack it, and really have an open conversation and realize that actually it's more of a shield, and trying to deflect it instead of addressing what the real issue is. Because often when you also don't do and you don't address the real issue, it also then removes that one very important thing, which is trust. And once you don't have trust, as we normally say, everything else then just begins to fall apart. People are almost doing this thing that is robotic. And I think my greatest fear is organizations where people do things in motions, and that's why we have 83% people who are just quiet quitters. They can't talk, they can't say anything, even when they know things are going down.
Very good. There is Stella Muigai. How do you respond to a leader who is reactive and combative in their communication without being rage baited to react?
I think in fact, maybe the real question, Richard, here is, would we say that that's a leader? But it puts into perspective what we normally also say, that most people that are in positions of hierarchy should never confuse it with leadership. So it doesn't mean that because somebody sits at the top of the chain that they are really a leader. They could have gotten there because of a number of years they've worked, experience. In Kenya, it could even be, nepotism. Maybe they know somebody, but I wouldn't call them really a leader. I think the first step is really being able to, if you're within that organization, if you're within that HR, is to help the individual to understand what leadership is. And a lot of organizations we've been talking with Grace don't really have a very formal way of inducting leaders, and we've used the excuse that we found these people, so they have to be there. But I think it's become more sensitive with the generation that we have now. You can't bulldoze or steamroll through them. It can really backfire, and our politicians have learned the hard way. It can really backfire. So it's only a matter of time before they find themselves isolated, and you cannot be a leader without followers, Richard. Remember that. And so obviously that kind of a person will not even have followers. People who are probably scared and they're there because they want their jobs, or what we are calling the quiet quitters. So I feel like it's just a deck of cards just waiting to fall down anytime.
And I think this is where self-control or self-management comes in, because it is about you. It's not about the other person. If you respond to issues that you think that provoke you, you're being baited. So it is to your advantage that you manage how you respond. There is a question by Coach Madangani Muya, council member, is asking, most managers have studied management, yet don't practice the management and leadership skills. And there is a disconnect on how they relate or how they handle employees. Toxic than pilipili mixed with raw onion. I mean, he's intensifying the question. Is AI the missing link?
I would say, Richard, significantly, yes. A lot of people actually they tick all the boxes in terms of experience, doing their part at work, increasing their papers. But unfortunately, they forget a very important part. The moment somebody is given the title of a leader, and that's usually like a blank canvas. But a leader means you have to have people. And I'm emphasizing here that you cannot be a leader without followers. And so for most people tend to confuse positional leadership from permissional leadership. For me, I feel like an emotionally intelligent leader practices by default permissional leadership, meaning that they lead people from the heart and people actually want to be led by them. And that's a difference. But a positional leader who then lacks AI, as I said, people don't have a choice. They are the boss. That's why they use their position to lead. And so those two have such a significant contrasting difference to the organization. And as I said, I stand to be corrected, but if we look at the ones that have ended up not doing so well, whether it's not just locally like in Nakumato or Uchumi or Tuskys, even as high as Nokia, I believe. I mean, the study on Nokia is such a big contrast. They had such positional leaders. People at the bottom could not even talk to them. They sat at the top of the ivory tower. And so people could not even give feedback. They would rather keep quiet than tell their leaders what was happening on the ground. And so for me, anybody really gets to fall down.
Thank you very much. I think this is where you balance intellectual quotient and emotional intelligence. Some people think that you only need intellectual quotient to be a good leader. And this is where we need to applaud our emotional intelligence. There's a question here, and I think it is related to, yes?
There's a question that I probably would wish that Newton handles,
Yes.
which is somebody who wishes to have their name
Yeah,
anonymous.
I'll come to
Oh,
that.
that's what you're coming to that. Okay,
yes,
Sawa.
yes, I'll come to that. What about, you've mentioned that people should sleep proper hours so that they can have a better mix of those good chemicals. What about people who don't sleep for 15 hours? They work in shifts, and you've mentioned that for them to have those good mixes, they should sleep 15 hours. What should they do? What should you tell them?
No, absolutely. In fact, we started by talking about the brain, and the brain, sort of this center of everything that I always say it's a center that holds everything together. The benefit of actually resting, and it's not just resting. I think when we first started this talk with Grace, we talked about something called brain food. And we did emphasize that it's the one thing that you really want to keep, to keep perfectly healthy. When you get to sleep well, when you get to eat well, when you exercise regularly, when you engage in mind-body practice, I mean, we've seen from studies that this actually correlates to a much more better leader. And the opposite is true. The people that and I know we've had this very big debate, and I think when Elon Musk bought Twitter at that time before turning it into X, there was this debate about the fact that he was even sleeping at the office as an organization. And I know people here who probably researched and gone through a lot of the companies that he runs. It's a very different style of leadership, but is it one that you could say really encourages that kind of a connection with the people? Maybe not. It depends on which side of the divide that you sit. But for me, what I see is that people who practice more self-management as leaders tend to have a much more better team. When you have a better team, they perform well. When they perform well, you're able to meet your objectives collectively as a team. But a leader who sleeps for 1 hour, trust me, Richard, you'll be so edgy when you wake in the morning. If you need 15 cups of coffee to keep you alert, already by default, you'll even be practicing a very different style of leadership on that basis alone, or the fact that you're not even sleeping well.
Very good. Before I go to that question, which is anonymous, how do you deal with a leader or boss who is always out of context, absent-minded, don't solve any office conflict as a colleague? How do you go about it?
Maybe short of recommending that they do an EI class, but I think that's one of the most difficult questions I've seen, is where people ask that as a team, you may find that you have quite a high level of emotional intelligence, but you're sort of in this leadership quagmire where the leader doesn't really have that. It's a difficult one, Richard. I can't say I have a straight answer. But what I hope is that the EI or your high level of EI helps you understand the kind of boss that you have, and therefore you're able to sort of navigate by knowing, because you're not only aware about yourself but aware about the leader that you have within the team. So it doesn't surprise you in terms of the behaviors that they have. It would be much more difficult if you don't use it, I would say, the word might not be to survive, but to navigate within that. Of course, it gets to instances where it becomes extremely unbearable. Then, of course, you would really have to be able to move.
Chris, I have lost that question, one that was meant to be private. I've lost it. I'm trying to look for it. I can't see it. I saw it though.
Yeah, let me, you can ask another one and I can try and fish it out.
Yeah. There is Edward Wangeshi. Are leaders allowed to be angry irrespective of emotional intelligence?
Well, that's a very loaded question. I don't know whether I would put irrespective, because I think we're all agreeing here that emotional intelligence is just as important in anybody who is a leader. Are they allowed to be angry? I think so, because they're human beings. But they would need to come up front and say, you know what, I'm sorry, team, I got angry, or my emotions got the better of me. I should have handled better. That's a difference between an emotional intelligent leader and one who's not. Knowing that because I do understand where sometimes you could be in a very heated meeting, and in organizations where there's a lot of push and pressure, sometimes that gets the better of you. But knowing that you sort of went off the rail and telling the team that, guys, I shouldn't have done this, is also where you begin to then practice emotional intelligence.
In luck, Grace?
No, Richard, not yet.
Okay, I saw it actually.
Yeah, I think she has defeated.
Yeah, I saw it actually.
Although there's one I can see, which is from an anonymous attendee. It says, how do you deal with a leader boss who's always out of context? I think we've answered that, right?
Yeah, that is the one that you just answered.
Yeah.
I think that one, it has been removed. I saw it. Is self-awareness identify your triggers? Is part of identifying your triggers. That is by Rebecca Kimau. Do not allow emotions to control you. She's talking about self-awareness is knowing your triggers. Probably she wants you to comment on that.
No, absolutely. Because in fact, the first I think the first point we said about being aware in yourself as a leader is just knowing about I like the way you put it, like your triggers, but also knowing how those triggers impact others. It's not just about knowing them, but how do they impact on other people? Because especially when you're in leadership or when you're in teams, it's difficult to not have an impact that those triggers can have. And when people they are expected to be following you, the impact is much, much more. Even when you're in a team, by the way, it's still important to know how your behaviors impact the rest of the team.
Thank you. Ann Nyamu seems to have been excited by being at the top of the organization does not make you a leader. You cannot be a leader without followers. Very insightful. Probably you can make her more excited because she has really been triggered by that comment.
I mean, for me, Richard, as I said, my philosophy is that already we have such a very short, limited life. You don't gain anything by sort of just walking around with these shackles of anger and bitterness. Really, those are things that you can be able to do away with. And the best way to do it is just to begin to be able to understand, practice, and sharpen on your EI.
Very good. There is Julius Mwangi. I like the idea of leaders putting a serious check in their personal lives, psychological factors, sleep, exercise, diet. But I wonder, how does a leader handle IQ imbalances from senior bosses? I think it is emotional intelligence that he wanted to talk about. How do you handle the imbalances from senior bosses or owners sometimes, for example?
It's true, Julius. I mean, in an ideal situation, in fact, we tend to think that where you have an opportunity to have your personality test and those of others, it helps you to understand how to be able to even effectively correlate with them. And that I'm saying is an ideal situation. So in organizations where I've seen that everybody does for example, a 360 analysis and maybe a personality profile test, whether you're using DISC or any other methodology. I've seen, in my opinion, that it really helps because people understand how they can be able to correlate with each other. The problem is where you don't even have that in the first place. So for me, my default is that you, as a matter of fact, sharpen yourself first, because when you sort of have such a high index of EI, it allows you to be able to be in a very different space from somebody who does not. And so there should be a distinct difference between the way you handle it, even if it is your boss, because you can often tell, by the way, as part of being aware about my boss's behavior and how it impacts on me, this is what I need to be able to do, even when I walk into the meeting. What are some of the words that would tend to trigger, and what are the words that tend to have much more, for lack of a better word, they trigger more dopamine release in my boss? I should be knowing that, isn't it? So if you know that, then it helps you. What are the words that tend to sort of seem to really trigger him to get into adrenaline or a fight or flight mode? If I know that, then how can I be able to avoid it? Yeah.
Very good. I train people in public speaking, and I always tell them that tone carries meaning in your message. And there's a question here. How could you respond when a leader raises his voice in a senior management meeting and you are present as HR in the same meeting?
Yeah, that's a very it's a very good topic, Richard. But I also believe maybe with grace we need to find time to be able to present it. There's a topic we normally have on assertiveness, and one of the things we train is how to learn to say no without seeming aggressive. So I think there are certain techniques that you can be able to use that allows you to sort of I don't want to use the word mitigate, but to sort of get into a much more softer landing. And by the way, those skills are very, very important. One of them is something we tend to call, trying to remember the word, fogging. Fogging is something you use. So if somebody raises their voice, how do you answer them in such a way that they actually, you sort of calm them down very quickly? And so those are techniques that you have to be able to know. And I also believe that when you are a highly intelligent HR, you would know. And so if I was working with you, Richard, and let's say you're the boss and you come in and you scream, I asked for these files to be brought into my office and they did not come. Now the meeting is starting and I have the files in front of me. Why didn't you do this? So one of the examples I can use as fogging is I would say, Richard, indeed, we could have done better to bring the files much more quickly to your office. We'll do better next time. Now already you know you can't raise your voice again, because I've said to you that we could have done better and we should have brought it as requested. So we call that a fogging technique. But unless it's something that you consciously know about and you know how to practice it, it helps you, because in those cases, you're not necessarily escalating the situation far much more worse. Yeah.
That is quite good in terms of response. There's a question here. Leaders are supposed to be handling challenges from the heart. What about a situation where it affects your performance in the eyes of your supervisor, becoming soft while things are not working?
Absolutely. That's usually tough because when we talk about permissional leadership and leading with the heart, you have to be careful because there's a propensity to be seen as being soft. So the advice is usually learn how to balance care and candor. And for me, I would say if you, for those who are familiar with Robert Greene's work, he says a leader should know when to have an iron fist and a velvet glove, and when to remove. So I mean, maybe that's a bit on the extreme side, but you should never lose sight of the fact that when it's required to have tough conversations, and you need to, and that's part of EI. The problem comes in when, again, you lean too much on the soft side, avoiding the tough conversations that need to be taken. So that balance of care and candor is important.
Okay, there's another question that has come there. It's quite long. Let me look for it. Yeah, I think the question you are looking for was mine. I deleted mistakenly. So please help. I work as a HR assistant in this company that I have been in the last 2.5 years. So from around March, it has not been easy for me. So apparently, like at times, they feel like I am a threat. How should I handle that? I think it is a question. Probably she's good. Probably she follows the rules. She does follow the way I'm getting it. Wants to do the right things, but probably the culture does not allow that to happen. How should you handle that?
Maybe we should start with Grace before I give my thoughts. Grace, your comments?
Grace, what do you think?
Come again, Richard. I was busy looking for questions.
Yes, the question as reservist, it was deleted by mistake. There's a place where this particular person has been working for a while, for 2.5 years, but she feels that they are afraid or not welcoming how she does her work. And I believe probably she follows the law, she follows policies, and she has become a threat. How should she exist in such an environment?
That is, I have seen somebody asking about what kind of environment are we talking about that's conducive. And I think one of the ones that we are talking about is this one that is not very conducive. And then one of the things that we have learned is to be aware of how your style of leadership affects others. So for you is to understand that the way you show up, the way you do your things has an effect on other people. Now, is it positive? Is it negative? Is one thing that you need to have. And probably this is a conversation we can take offline so that we can dig deeper into these things. Now, sometimes when people feel threatened by you, it is okay because sometimes you probably are showcasing professionalism and what do we call it, positive energy and all that, not the other threat. Some people are threatened because you are also very disrespectful, you are also very hard-headed. Sometimes you also need to understand how to play your politics, such that when sometimes emotional intelligence sometimes involves you saying no, but not directly telling your boss that, excuse me, this is no. Sometimes depending on the kind of leader you're dealing with, there's some people that no needs to be put oil and makeup and lip balm and everything, so that it comes from like you've taken SGR and not a flight directly. So that is part of emotional intelligence. One of the things that you need to understand is yourself, like Newton has said, and then understand others. Understanding others means that you can tell. Already you're saying it's been hard for you to air out your opinions because you're always quiet because you're a threat. But my question is, what has led into this? Probably more information is needed for us to advise on this one. And if you have my number, we can take this offline.
Yeah, because
so that we can, yeah, we
because
can
there's
dig
also
deeper
the
into this one.
sorry, yeah, I agree with you because there is also the element of a romantic relationship in the mix.
There's a romantic relationship.
Yes.
Richard, for for me, it reminds me of a book that I think we've also taught for the Art of War for Women. So there are two perspectives, Richard, and I think she definitely is right to be very concerned because there's a bias already within the HR manager because of that existing relationship with a different co-worker. From where we sit, and I'm hoping that Grace will also then be able to give a bit more context into this. I would say when you find yourself in that position, it means that everything that you do has to really be above board, because chances are any small fault or mistake that you're likely to make can get blown up unnecessarily because people are looking for opportunities to sabotage you. And so it calls on you double checking, triple checking, quadruple checking the work that you're doing. You follow the SOP to the latter. And of course, where there are avenues, because there are organizations where they have, for example, whistleblowing and they have those anonymous reporting, then you, of course, would tend to be able to use that. But you have to have your facts correct. That's very important, Richard, because we say that you do not want to bring up something that you cannot substantiate. And remember, whatever action that you decide that you would want to take, you have to be prepared to go the full way, knowing the consequences that it might come. In some places, for example, just the fact of reporting, and if you're not so sure whether the reports are purely anonymous, just put you in a very big jeopardy. And it means that there's a likelihood you might not be able to be within the same position. I would finish by saying what Grace has said is very important. We sometimes find ourselves, and not by choice, in organizations that we know the environment is in itself is actually toxic. So of course, I always say that you're there for that particular short time, but your health and mind and mental health is equally as important. So of course, you would put priority in trying to find a place where you can be able to work and give your very best. This one might not be the best scenario, but I would really balance that and do your work diligently, be above board in everything that you're doing, but also keep records of everything that you're doing and make sure that both the policies, the SOP, and the law is on your side. Because if anything should happen, that's the only thing that you have to be able to protect you.
Very good. As you prepare for you.
I've just noticed the part for the relationship. Sorry, apologies, I hadn't read that. And I think to top up with what Newton has said, sometimes the part for their relationship and sabotage, you probably need to see how is it that you can unpack that sabotage and figure out a way to overcome it. Their relationship is none of your business. It really should not be part of whatever. Even if sometimes it affects you, you need to also keep off. Of course, if you have an avenue to escalate that conversation, you need to. If you do not, then for you, it's to sift through the noise. I don't know which writer said that. Sift through the noise so that you're able to still do your work in the midst of all the noise around you. And Paul Esana, that you're going through that. And please reach out to me directly, separately, so that we can have a call and unpack that situation.
Yes, Newton, it is your time for your parting shot. But before you do that, let me ask you a question I was asked yesterday as I was talking about soft skills. Some people take advantage of empathy. There are people who will know that, Newton loves when you have a problem, he will give you 1,000 bob. And yeah, how do you handle these people who know that you have been trained in emotional intelligence and they got advantage of those personalities, those triad personalities? How do you manage them?
I think and maybe Richard, the benefit we have is that you can also sometimes be able to see beyond a smoke screen. I want to use the word about emotional reasoning as a leader, because you remember what we said, and I found that to really help me is that you don't just look at the feelings in yourself, but also in the other person, and then you combine it with facts and information. And typically most people want to try and take advantage and throw at you balls that they shouldn't even be throwing in the first place. But when you combine it with facts and information, usually it tends to crumble down very quickly. They're either taking advantage. I usually use the example of the fact that as a professional leader, you'll find maybe because they know that you're a very emotional, intelligent leader, they'll tell you today, my kid was unwell and I wasn't in the right mind to come to work. And so the first time you tell them it's okay, don't come. But the second time they call you and they're telling you that, and then you now use it, you use that emotional reasoning and be able to combine it with other facts okay, so that you can be able to differentiate when somebody is now taking advantage and being able to practice that candor bit where you can have a tough conversation. Yeah.
Very good. I want you to have a parting shot. It looks like this topic of leadership and emotional intelligence brought a lot of people today. What will you tell them? Because it looks like there's a huge appetite for leadership and emotional intelligence. I don't know if you told your friends to come, or it is the topic, or it's a mixture of both. Give us your parting shots.
I think for me, Richard, the way I look at it, and this would be my clarion call to the people that are in this room today, is that the benefit of practicing emotional intelligence is not just for you to become better at work. It's really just for you to have a much more fulfilling life. And that has been the biggest lesson for me. It helps you to understand when you need to, pull back, when you need to unpack the people that you're working with, the relationships. It's even surprising that even in families, we see people that struggle because they don't practice EI. They don't actually have a very good relationship even with their own family members. I remember meeting one of the doctors because they are my clients, and I was telling them, by the way, so how are your parents doing? And the doctor was like, me, I don't even talk to my dad. I've never talked to my dad from the time I was a kid. And I'm just saying that sometimes we lose that opportunity to be able to be the change drivers because we probably don't realize the area that we need to work on. EI is a place that is becoming important. And I'll finish with this, Richard. If you look at in 2020, we were saying that by 2025, the two top critical skills that will be required by employers is critical thinking and reasoning and emotional intelligence. Now, surely we're in 2025. What more do we need so that we can be able to take this seriously?
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, we have to appreciate Newton, and I can see Paul has given us the link to Get It Right, the WhatsApp group. Please join so that when these conversations are announced, you are able to get them firsthand. There is that link that has been given to us by Paul. Please join. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Richard James. Yes, please.
There's also the link on the YouTube. There are people who are asking about the recording. And
yes.
The link to the channel has been shared. Kindly subscribe. And of course, follow us on Instagram, get Atara Solutions, Facebook, like our Facebook page, Atara Solutions. Connect with us on LinkedIn, Atara Solutions, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, Get It Right with Atara Solutions. And of course, join the WhatsApp group. It says it's full. Paul, please check. You can share, I think, Get It Right with Atara Solutions 1. There's a lot of room. There's about room for quite a number of people. If 3.0 is full, kindly share that back. Back to you, Richard.
Thank you. Newton, in the face of data protection, there are people who could love to reach you. Could you give them your number or your email, or they get through Grace? You're on mute.
Saying absolutely. Grace has my number. Can share through Atara. I'm happy to be able to help where I can.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, it has been a wonderful evening of demystifying the concept of leadership as it is related to emotional intelligence. My name is Richard. Richard is a HR professional. I help people in preparing for interviews, and I also make people speak like Newton, Ciela, and Grace, and you get paid for it. Thank you very much. Let us meet on Tuesday for another amazing topic. Good night and God bless you.
Yes, Paul has shared the link to the WhatsApp group again. I think that's better. All right, thank you, Richard. Thank you, Newton. And thank you to our audience. We shall see you next Tuesday. Richard, you know the topic you are discussing next week?
No, I don't know. Tell me.
Yeah, we are talking about gut health because it has a relationship to do with stress.
Okay. All
yeah.
right. Yeah. I hope they've had
Interesting.
they will be available. Thank you so much, Grace. Enjoy yourself. Have a good night.
Have a lovely night. Good night.